Okay, here's another poll.
Yeah.
Here it
Speak
comes.
out really loudly so people can hear you.
So in your industry, where do you see more opportunities for SIRA? Do you see more opportunities in matrix connectivity or in standalone connectivity without matrix infrastructure?
Okay, guys. Take your pick. We only got questions with 2 choices this time. Let me know when the results are in, Stefan, and I can have a look at them.
It's still working?
It's still working. Oh, no, just
okay, I think now we can have a look.
Okay, let's see. Okay, 82% of you said matrix connectivity and 18 standalone connectivity. That's interesting, isn't it?
Well, that's actually what we wanted to hear, because for all those not having a matrix yet, this means for us we can sell another matrix.
Yeah, see?
Well, but moving away from the fun stuff, focusing again on SIRA, having a look at the connectivity details. Yes, we are encoding and decoding the signal, and as I said, we're using that box for wide area network connections as well as for local area network connections. So that basically means we should be capable of being close to what a Formula One car is doing on a racetrack, but we should also work across country roads and probably crossing acres with a tractor. So we'd like to do the stretch as much as we can with SIRA to operate both on country roads, going cross country here, but also being quite fast on a racetrack. So I would compare us more or less with a kind of rally car, getting the best out of both worlds.
Let's not get carried away with the cars.
And this is not only related to latency, this is also related to the bandwidth utilization. This goes pretty much hand in hand with each other. Bandwidth is nothing without latency, and latency is nothing without bandwidth. So we need a certain amount of bandwidth, and we need to have even less latency on the network side if possible. And then we are able to send signals up to 4K 30, even at 8-bit color depth and 444 sampling across the link. And the bandwidth utilization is pretty adaptive, and we will see this later on in the demo. So if there are static images, like in lots of control room environments, we're just shifting over a few kilobits. So we're not stressing the network by any means. And only if we move something, bandwidth utilization goes up. And I've given you some values over here. The 1080p 60 usually acts between 10 and 100 megabits if there's lots of operation, word processing, movement of windows and things like that, or even full motion picture. And then it pretty much depends on the content of the motion picture on how much bandwidth we really need. On average, I would say 30 to 40 megabits on a 1080p 60, or even on a 4K 30, because there's always quite some room that can be easily compressed, is a good value to spot on. And for those that need the requirement to limit the bandwidth to just 10 megabit, you can do that on the output stream, but be aware of the fact that the performance on the motion picture video will suffer slightly from it. And latency is pretty much dependent on the network. Having fiber to the home is probably best, but using DSL connections or cable modem type things, they have an additional amount of latency because they are running a codec, not for the video, but for the data in order to send it across such kind of a medium. So that's something that we need to be aware of. Nothing to do with the performance of our product by itself. And then we can basically access the data stream with a simple HTML5 browser. My first intention was to start clicking that right now, but we leave that to the live demo afterwards, because then we have a much nicer comparison. Or using one of the software clients that we offer for Windows free of charge, and that we offer for Linux and Mac based on a Java client. And none of the clients, neither the browser needs to be installed. Of course, the browser needs to be installed on your desktop or on your mobile device. But usually every operating system comes already with a browser, so there's no extra need for additional amount of installation. All the clients work basically as a kind of a portable app, so there's no administrator power required or authority required in order to have one of the clients up and running on your desk. So this makes connectivity quite easily.
And I know you already explained more or less all of it, but you know, you wrote there right at the end, without software installation, and you put a question, an exclamation mark on it. So can you just say in one sentence, not one word, why this is so important?
That's quite important, as I pointed out, that there is basically no administrational power required for starting such a session, and that's improving the flexibility to connect from anywhere in the world, being at home, being even in an internet cafe, you could basically start such kind of a connection. And then you just depend, of course, on the connectivity of that location with regard to bandwidth and latency. But this makes you very flexible and allows for best operation at remote control level.
Perfect, thank you. So, I don't know, is that a question too early, but I just wondered, are there any other access options?
Of course, that's why we have this OR right behind that with a text. And we pointed out that we also have a user station for that. So for all those that need to have a less flexible environment or having a kind of a static setup, we allow for having a hardware box that allows pre-configuration and easy access straight from a work desk environment. And if you look at the unit by itself, it offers 3 video outputs, all at 4K 60. We have 2 network interfaces and we have sufficient USB interfaces. And by that, we can use that with a pre-configured operating system to pre-configure it with individual streams or with complete layouts. So we can define multiple streams, multiple IP addresses of the individual encoders, as we see it here on the direct connect versions, and we can set up the unit to run individual streams at full screen. But if these are considered to be 1080p streams, all of them, we could easily use a 4K 60 screen attached to the user station and have a native resolution, a 2x2 split even, multi-viewing all the streams at once and then enlarging one of the streams whenever it comes to operation to see it in large size. But since it's already native here and depending on the 4K screen, you can even operate in the individual picture-in-picture modes here.
Okay.
That's quite handy. And not just a single screen can be used. Of course, you can use the whole connectivity that the unit offers and attach a second or even a third screen and having kind of preview modes or different types of operator canvases. And this not only works with direct connect systems, since more than 80% of you prefer to have access to matrices, we can, of course, do exactly the same setup with matrix connected units, take the streams represented on an operator canvas. This can be a service and support desk with a single screen with multiple types of layout that we can easily swap with just hotkey commands, or this can be multiple screens and we can shift around the images. As a summary, we have as the highlights 3 4K 60 outputs. We have the possibility to put even 2 or 3 or more user stations in a master-slave combination to allow for more than 3 screens and still move the mouse over the complete operator canvas. We have favorite and preset layout shortcuts, so we can define individual streams as well as the presets, and we can bring them up clicking on the menu or using a shortcut hotkey that we can individually assigned to the different favorites or layouts. And on top of the KVM access sessions, we also provide browser, SSH, VNC, RDP, and ESX access to virtual clients or any other type of remote session of that kind. With a dual network interface support, we can have redundancy, or we can have simultaneous access to two different, completely different network segments, and we can connect both from streams from both sides at the same time, and have out of completely different networks individual streams on our operator canvas. And the whole setup of the user station is per user station setup, can be transferred to others, but is running completely autonomous, so there is no single point of failure with regard to management or things like that. We can, of course, back up and restore settings that are done on the user station and transfer it to others.
Can I ask you a question, Mark? You just explained about this user station. I just wondered, this user station that we're just looking at here, can this be used at the same time as the software client that you explained to us earlier?
Of course it can, because it's just starting another client session, and since we allow per encoder up to 8 sessions simultaneously, we can have multiple operator desks connecting via a user station to one specific target device, and on top we can have, let's say, a service person from home being on standby, connecting to the same PC, giving service to the PC because one of the operators is complaining that there's some issue going on.
Okay.
So that's possible for sure.
Thank you. Just brilliant.
Almost. So we're done with the slideshow for today. Final slide basically showing the live demo setup that we have. We've prepared for you a single head PC connected to one of the standalone zeros here, connected via an HDMI and the USB interface. We have another PC outputting a dual head signal into 2 standalone zeros. And we have a quad head PC connecting to 2 standalone zeros and to 2 matrix connectivity zeros. Apparently, we're having some issue with the quad head, so we're just utilizing one of the signals. And why are we doing that? We just want to show you the side-by-side operation of both and show that there is basically no difference in performance and no difference basically in terms of latency when going through a matrix or through an extension line than being on a local unit. All these devices are connected to an IP network. And from the network switch, we're using 2 user stations because we have set up 4 screens. And these 2 are connected to the network as well. And at the end of the operator desk setup demonstration, we will also add the connectivity, especially for you, Anke, with the laptop, making soft client sessions using a browser and using the Windows client and putting it side by side. And we can then show also bandwidth requirements and change the behavior of the stream in terms of the colors that we shift and the influence on the bandwidth requirements. So now,
lovely slide.
So now let's walk over to
our live demo. So you've seen all the theory now, and now we're going to show you the setup that we've done in this room here. And as we all know, theory is wonderful. Reality is so much better, and we will take away this glass.
So here's our little setup, pretty much guarded by our Draco, because everybody wants to take the units away from us. We have the single head PC connecting via USB and HDMI into the first Zero standalone unit. We have a dual head PC connecting into the 2 standalones, and we have the quad head PC connecting via extension and directly into 4 zeros that we have stacked right over here. And then we're taking all the network signals and taking them into this very basic network switch. There is no configuration been done on that network switch. We've just plugged it in. So in this case, it really is the case that we can simply plug it in and have a play. And then we're taking the two blue cables here, going to the user stations right in the front at the operator canvas. And we have 4 screens in a row, and the 4 screens in a row connected to the 2 user stations, and the large screen on top basically giving you an overview of the complete setup. So luckily I have my colleague Stefan here with me.
Wave with your right hand, Stefan. Multiple waves.
So Stefan is basically our operator here, and as you can imagine, he's from the marketing department, so he has no training on the system. So I'm just asking him to bring up a simple layout. So he's just executing a single hotkey command, and with just a single hotkey command, we are bringing up the 3 screens here of our Quartet PC, and you can see that we can easily shift around an image right across the edges of the screen. And you can, I hope that you can see the performance quite nicely. And with another hotkey command, we can simply switch to a different layout and see even the split screen on the 3rd screen right over here. And we can shift around the image quite nicely, even going into the small pip window. And if we're taking a focus on the quad split here, of course, we can move in the mouse into the individual windows. Here we have the dual head PC setup. We can operate it. Sorry for the video quality here, but it should only indicate the performance that we have. And we can also jump over to another source again, going into a different type of setup, showing on the secondary screen a nice picture-in-picture setup with 1 large screen and 3 small pips right at the side of it. And now going back to a full screen layout, giving you a much better view on the individual things that we are able to do. Having a nice video running here of our headquarter building, some drone images. And we hope that the performance is reasonable over the video conferencing system, whatever we're seeing here. Stefan, how does it feel? Does it feel like kind of being...
Very easy.
Very easy?
With no practice.
He wants to be an air traffic controller now, that's it. You lost him.
We'll see, we'll see. So this is mainly with regard to our user station connectivity and the operator canvas. So now let's have a look on how this has been done using a browser or a soft client access.
And Mark, what kind of bandwidth do we need for this, or are you going to show that in a minute?
I'm going to show that in a minute.
Great.
So let's make this signal slightly smaller and bring up the browser interface. So you can now see the browser interface over here, and I can start that. And you can see that it's quite scattering on the browser interface. And if we, Stefan, let's go for the large setup back again, because whatever we're seeing in the browser image, we're seeing on the lower left screen running quite smoothly. I hope you can see that. So what's happening here is I'm running this out of my laptop, and the laptop basically runs 2 camera signals, runs the whole Soho session here, runs the soft client, and runs this browser client. And the browser, as I said, is the most flexible way of accessing the device. And whatever has an advantage on the one side, there's the flip side of the medal. So the HTML5 session is by far less performant than what the clients are, because they are by far more hardware closer programmed with regard to C# and things like that. So it's much more suitable to compare that with a client session. So if I'm bringing up a client session of the same source, I hope that you can recognize that this is by far more performant, even using the same PC, and that outlines that it's the performance is pretty much dependent on the CPU power, but also on the software and how it's been programmed on the devices.
Is there any way to influence?
Yes, there is, and we're getting to this in a moment. I'm just shutting down. We're shutting down the browser session now because my laptop's running hot. So what you can see, hopefully here with the connection property details, it shows basically the bandwidth requirements and the performance of the video we are running in that client. And I can even take this to full screen mode now.
Ah, brilliant.
So we have that slightly enlarged. Let's go to a real full screen view. And doing that, there's basically no difference from having, well, usually you're fooled around because you think you're at your laptop, but basically you're not, because you're working on your remote client. And this performance window here shows you what kind of video settings we have. I usually always use the automatic setup because that copes with almost all requirements. And you can see that on this motion picture, we're jumping around between 40, 50 megabits, 60 megabits. That's basically what we receive, and we will see that we will have about 26 or 25 frames a second here. That basically is dependent on the performance of the client side as well as on the bandwidth. If I'm changing, and especially for you, Anke, I can even go to a black and white setting, and I can change that on the fly, and we can see that the bandwidth requirement is going down dramatically. And by simply stopping the video, you can see that it takes only a fraction of a second, and we're dropping down to a few kilobits. And if I'm now taking this back into an automatic general purpose video, I can color it up again. And by just a change, we will see a short peak. But as soon as we have a static image, you can see that it's just 10, 12, 13 kilobits. And as soon as we continue operation here, and let's say make this a little bit smaller, you can still see that we are on this single head PC here, so it's not a fake, it's not my desktop. You can see what the changes are when moving and shuttling around in image. And that's basically all about it.
That kind of concludes our live demo, doesn't it? Or
it does.
It does. Oh, thank God it all worked. Well, we're very pleased with it. Thank you, Mark.